when things started opening, a lot of our learners were not ready for what was being offered to them. So we had to educate them on the selection of the different types of careers. We had to prepare them for what life in South Africa was going to be.
The madrasa and the masajid of LMA laid the foundation for what you see in Lenasia of the vibrancy of deen. I normally call it town planning.
Well, the key streets in Lenasia for businesses in the early 70s was Hemsbrook Avenue, Concord Place, Station Place. It was all under one banner called Top Shops.
The history of Lenasia is one filled with a mixture of joy, pain, heartache, and is also an example of showing hope and resilience in the face of adversity. This followed the evictions from Fietas, which took place in the mid-1960s. Radio Islam takes a look at two key institutions at the center of Lenasia's history, as well as the business dynamics of the community over the last 5 decades. The Lenasia Muslim Association is one of those, which was established in 1964 to primarily cater for Islamic education in Lenasia, Lenasia South, Eldorado Park and Zakaria Park.
The Rainbow Masjid was one of the first masjids in Lenasia, which was not only for Salah, but all activities of the community was around the Lenasia Muslim Association. Around Rainbow Masjid. I remember Qari Basit came to South Africa when I was a very young child. And I remember him still reading, and we were the only people in the South that had a masjid, and he came here to read for us. So like that, many, for approximately up to about 75, 80, it was the masjid of Lenasia. Then the other masajid, Islam came in about 74, 75, and then today we have approximately 30 masajid.
Moulana Pando goes on to explain that the Lenasia Muslim Association also played a role in social welfare and in the fight against the apartheid regime.
I remember when we came to Lenasia, it was a bucket system. So you come once a week to take that bucket out, and that's how it was. And if it rained, your car was finished. And only few people had cars. So you take the bus or you catch a train from here to Braamfontein. From Braamfontein, then you go wherever you want to go. So it was very difficult. So there were many people that didn't have sufficient for their needs at home. So LMA started a soup kitchen, providing welfare of basic food, clothing for the children, and alhamdulillah, more than 5 decades, half a century on, we're still doing it. LMA had a very big impact, not only as far as the madrasa goes, but social, welfare, and economically. And in fact, Dr. Saluji, who was a great member, was a vice chairman and then became the chairman of LMA, was a freedom fighter for the cause of the country. He spent time in jail with Katrada and Mandela and all these people. So we had activists from the Lenasia Muslim Association who contributed to the liberation of our country.
By the early 1960s, a thriving commercial hub known as Top Shops by residents was developing, and shops were doing a more or less brisk trade in the business district situated between Extension 1, Greyville, Rainbow and surrounding townships. Lenasia Business Forum's Yunus Bamji explains how window dressing was an important part of the commercial trade of Lenasia.
At one point in the early 70s, households used to go window shopping in Lenasia, and from shop to shop, and there were approximately over 200 to 300 shops, and everybody had a special of designing their shops with displays, and it was a special art to call a qualified window dresser set to come in. If by chance you try to set your own window, you would be found wanting in how you set it. So everyone, it was a hallmark amongst people to set their windows in such a way that they attracted the public.
Bamji goes on to elaborate on the various family businesses in Lenasia.
Well, the key streets in Lenasia for businesses in the early 70s was Hemsbrook Avenue, Concord Place, Station Place. It was all under one banner called Top Shops. This made up the Top Shops. Then you had the other businesses which were in the residential area, what was township businesses, like in areas like near Park Primary Schools, there were businesses there, in Greyville. These were pockets of businesses which people were quite famous, but certain names did stand out. And some of them exist today and they don't exist today. As for myself, my whole family, although I'm in the business, in a different kind of business, Bamji Shoes was famous in this area. And it was a household name for 50 years in this area. And it was a starting point for many persons who were trying to find direction in the CBD. And people would say that, I'll meet you at Bamji's. Or, if you know where Bamji's is from, it was a starting point for direction. We had Gundu's fruits and vegetables in this area people went to. And we had Gulshan supermarkets, where Bamji stood was once a famous grocery place in Lenasia. We had a place like Kulfi ice cream. And then if you go on, today we still got them Tabelia Kesh and Kerry. Now all these names I'm giving you are locals who have been there for many, many years. Then we have Bismillah uniforms. They've been making uniforms for the past 40, 45 years for schools in that same line. We got the fish shop, which is more than 50 years old there. Central Fisheries, which is existing there. What has now the change is, you find that out of these big household names, less than 10% of them exist in the CBT today.
Another key institution in Lenasia is that of the Lenasia Muslim School. The school was initially established so that pupils could go for Jummah prayers on Fridays and to receive secular and Islamic education at one institution. This occurred in 1987, with Deputy Principal Mr. Muhammad Ibrahim Mia explaining.
It was a spontaneous idea that was being discussed by our ulama. There were various challenges in the government school at that time, and I think one of the biggest challenges was that at that time the Jummah Salah was being denied to Muslim learners. So some of our ulama got together. Moulana Yahya Bam was very instrumental in getting the ulama together and looking at the feasibility of starting a Muslim school. And I must reiterate, it wasn't a school for Muslims. It was a Muslim school that could actually look at the needs of whoever was prepared to come to the school.
Mr. Mia further explains that the community in Lenasia faced many challenges following the move from Fietas.
I was originally also a product of Fietas, of Free Rope, and I schooled at Nirvana School. At that time there was quite a few schools, Nirvana, there was Lens High, there was Trinity, there was MH Joseph at that time. I'm talking about high schools. So we all moved, we traveled to and fro from Johannesburg to Lens. The education system was that time run by a House of Delegates. That was still the time of apartheid, unfortunately. The education was always good, but those schools were always under-resourced. So what happened was, when the changes started coming from the 80s, late 80s, when we had now democracy and democratic elections, things opened up. Resources were still scarce, I must point out, because in which way were resources scarce was in the way that what was given in terms of the schools in Lens wasn't the same like schools that were so-called Model C schools. We didn't get the same type of resources. And that, in a way, it inhibited the growth of the schools here. But through it, we were known as a population, as an Indian population, as a Muslim population, we were known to be very resourceful by ourselves. So we took the little that we had and we planted it back into the schools. But obviously it wasn't sufficient at the time. I think the need was there to diversify. And what did we do by diversifying? We created a Muslim school. But the Muslim school that we created, what was the objective of it? And then I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to mention it again. The objective of it was to produce good learners that were morally well prepared to be integrated into society, that had some degree of responsibility to the community. And we took and we spent a lot of time and resources in developing learners, preparing them for the new South Africa.
He explains that since democracy, the school has adapted to the new socio-economic dynamic of Lenasia.
When the informal settlements came into Lens, the whole geography, the whole operation and existence of Lens changed. And what happened was, now there was a bigger need for schools, but the need for the schools, and I must clarify that, was no longer now just to serve the Indian community, it was to serve the neighboring communities, it was to serve the informal settlements. And a time came for us to play an important role in the community as well. And what was the role? To provide quality education. And when the school was established, we strived on providing quality education. And we did not at any point separate ourselves from government schools, or we didn't become elitist. We were always part of them. We followed the Gauteng Department of Education, the General Department of Basic Education curriculum. We were always part of the broader education system. But what we did is, we maximized our resources to provide quality education. And in so doing, what happened was, we gained a reputation for producing one of the better results amongst our schools in Lens.
Speaking towards its relationship with the rest of the community, Mia says there's a fruitful relationship between the school and Radio Islam.
Look, we work because Radio Islam is a community organization. We are a community organization as well. We have Moulana Dorat, who's our Amir of the school, and obviously Moulana Haider is also part of Radio Islam. So the connection is through, not only through Moulana, but it's ongoing, because Moulana will always raise with us if he needs any type of assistance with Radio Islam. We in turn will use Radio Islam to project some of our to advertise some of our projects, to basically pass on messages to the community. And whenever Radio Islam has any community project, we make sure we are involved, and vice versa. We get Radio Islam involved in our projects as well.